Hi, I'm Pam and I'm here to talk about retro video games. Today I'm talking about one of my favorite JRPGs that has a little bit of sci-fi, a little bit of fantasy, and a whole lot of crafting. It's Star Ocean: The Second Story. Star Ocean: Second Story was developed by Tri-Ace and released for the PlayStation in North America in 1999. As suggested by the name, it's the second game in the Star Ocean series, but the first was only released in Japan for the Super Famicom. That game didn't get officially released in English until 2008, when an enhanced remake came out on the PSP. It was also later ported to the PS4 and Switch. Right from the start, Second Story sets itself apart by letting you choose between two different protagonists. Though the overall story is the same regardless of who you pick, each character does have a number of scenes unique to them, giving you a different perspective on events. Some potential party characters you'll meet are also only recruitable by one or the other. I've usually chosen Rena when I've played this game in the past, so this time around I went with Claude. Claude Kenny is an ensign in the spacefaring Earth Federation, on his first mission and trying to live up to his famous commander father. Rena Lanford is a young woman with an unexplained magical healing power that lives on the technologically primitive planet Expel. Claude and Rena have very different introduction scenes, but regardless of who you pick, Claude will be mysteriously teleported to Expel just as Rena is attacked by a monster. He saves her using his phase gun. This, in combination with his futuristic clothing, makes Rena believe that Claude is the mythological hero of light, and Expel is currently in need of a hero. A meteorite, dubbed the Sorcery Globe, recently crashed on the planet, and now monsters are appearing and natural disasters are occurring. Rena brings Claude to her home of Arlia Village to thank him for saving her and find out if he is in fact the hero they've been looking for. JRPGs have a tendency to take a bit to really get going, and Star Ocean is no exception. It starts off very slowly. We spend a good 40 minutes in Arlia. We talk to the townspeople, the mayor, Rena's mom. Since the Sorcery Globe is on everyone's mind, Claude volunteers to go investigate it, hoping it will put him back in touch with his ship, somehow. He leaves on his own for the neighboring town of Salva, which isn't much bigger or more eventful than Arlia. Other than hearing worrying rumors about the mayor's son Alan, Claude doesn't learn much and returns to Arlia to find that disaster has struck. Alan has kidnapped Rena, so it's back to Salva to rescue her. Claude finds his way into the Salva mines. Rena, of course, doesn't just sit around waiting for rescue. If you're playing her, she escapes from the room she's locked in and also ends up in the mines. Either way, the two will meet up in a strange chapel and have to fight Alan together. Then, it's back to Arlia for more talking. Finally, around 2 hours in, we head off to the much larger city of Cross to really get this adventure started. There's a lot to love about the way you travel the map and visit cities and towns. First, thank goodness, there is a good mini-map while you're on the overworld. You get two views for it. One a zoomed out static view of the entire world, and one more of a close-up that rotates around as you do. Both of them have blinking red markers to show nearby places you can visit. This really helps to not waste your time by wandering around aimlessly and getting into countless random battles. Traveling the overworld map happens in an overhead view of a 3D environment, and while the textures don't look all that great today, it's cool to be able to rotate the camera around and get a good perspective of where you are and where you're going. The towns, on the other hand, take place on pre-rendered backgrounds which are absolutely beautiful. Each town has its own character and feel, from the outsides of the buildings to the insides of each shop and house. The first major city, Cross, has a huge castle, and the design of each screen does a great job of giving an impressive sense of scale. Talking to characters in towns is also likely to introduce you to some who will be willing to join your party, or at least point you in their direction. Early recruits include Celine, the sassy treasure-hunting mage, and Ashton, a hard-luck soul who has wound up with 2 dragons fused to his back in a boss fight ritual gone wrong. His interactions with his dragons are a real highlight. Most recruitable characters will come with their own questline or dungeon before they decide to join you. There are 10 possible party members, but since your total party maxes out at 8, you can only recruit 6 of them. One thing I'm not crazy about is that there really seems to be a default party that you're most likely to end up with. You have to know ahead of time that, for example, recruiting Ashton is going to prevent you from recruiting the powerful alien duo Opera and Ernest later on down the line. And refusing a character's request to join you or skipping them altogether just runs contrary to how I play JRPGs, and I'm sure that's the case for a lot of players. You get to know your companions not only through the usual ways, but also through the private action system. When approaching a town, you have the choice to go in all as a group or separately. If you split up, you can find your companions and have one-on-one interactions with them. Some will just be short conversations or observations, but in others they'll ask you to make some kind of choice or share your opinion on something. These events will contribute to hidden relationship values between each character, which will impact the scenes you see at the end of the game. Star Ocean boasts 87 different endings, and each character in your party can get a different one depending on their relationship scores. Private actions contain some of the most endearing scenes in the game. They also give the player a reason to go back to visit towns they've already been through, as you can get new private actions at different parts of the story or when you've recruited new characters. I often find JRPGs don't actually include much role-playing because the story and character you're playing is generally set. But these private actions do give the player a way to shape Claude or Rina's relationships and even personality a little, which I really appreciate. It allows me to feel a bit more ownership over the characters I'm playing. Overall, Star Ocean strikes a great balance of the usual big, world-ending threats we tend to be up against in JRPGs, and smaller, character-focused moments that give us a chance to learn more about Rina, Claude, and all their companions. Of course, the game isn't all talk. There's a ton of action as well. Star Ocean is an action RPG as opposed to using the usual turn-based combat system. Battles take place in a 3-dimensional field, though the camera is always pointed in the same direction. You get to have 4 active characters, and I personally always appreciate groups larger than 3. You can control whoever you like and switch between characters at will. You also have options for how much control you want to have over the combat. I go full manual, so I have control over both movements and abilities used, but you can also set things to auto or semi-manual. All the characters can do a basic attack and have access to an inventory menu for use of healing, buff, or damage items. The fighters can assign special attacks to L1 and R1, while the magic users have a menu of spells to choose from. Combat does pause while you're going through a menu, and both items and spells have a short cooldown before you can use another one. Each character has customizable AI in the game menu. This is how you can dictate the behavior of the characters you're not directly controlling. You could tell a fighter to conserve their killer moves, or to protect the team. A magic user could be told to go all out or save their mana. With mages, you can also prevent them from casting certain spells. Some tend to be mana drains, or just have really long cast animations that I don't want to watch over and over, so I love this. Combat really looks great. The spell and attack animations from both your party and the enemies are varied and impressive. I love Claude's Dragon Howl attack, which sends a ghostly dragon flying at an enemy. Or the lovely sound effect and dance of angels that appear when Rena resurrects a fallen companion. Characters also have voice lines for each spell or ability they're using, some of which have stuck in my head for many, many years. While there are one or two characters whose voices are a bit on the grating side, these vocal barks are a good way to add a little more flair to the characters. And the soundtrack is a perfect accompaniment to fights. Combat tracks are usually drum-heavy and intense, with a hint of triumph, even before you finish the fight and get a very victorious musical flourish. And the boss tracks, especially one called Dynamite, really just rock. They help to keep the adrenaline pumping while you're taking on what can be a very challenging task. The combat can be quite challenging, and you really need to pay attention. JRPGs have this tendency to lull me into slow reaction times, since they don't tend to be very difficult, and in a lot of them you can put your controller down mid-combat to check your phone and you'll be fine. That's not the case here, and if you stop paying attention for even a few seconds, your party can be easily wiped out. Combat can be very satisfying, but it's definitely not perfect. There are a number of enemies who are a real pain in the butt. These include ones with status effects like Paralyze or Petrify. If your whole party is affected by one of these, or both, or dead, it's game over. Though there are accessories you can equip that will prevent characters from getting one of these effects, some enemies can apply Paralyze, Poison, and Stone all at once. Other enemies can consume you. Many can temporarily stun you, or if you find yourself caught between two of them, they can just stun lock and bounce you around between them until you're dead. There's also collision between your characters, which can result in them blocking each other or end up standing on each other's heads. This can be a bit annoying, especially when fighting flying enemies that make your fighters jump up into the air to attack. And if you're locked onto a fast-moving target and they start running around, you'll end up chasing them, and that can go on for a while. I also often found myself lacking real choice in who I wanted in my combat party. Rena is the only decent healer in the game. While there are other characters with heals, they don't really hold a candle to her, so you'll always want her in the party unless you're overleveled. Claude is also very strong, so you're unlikely to want to go without him. And while I love the heraldry users, a lot of the more difficult fights are much easier to handle if you have 3 fighters who can keep enemies stunned and prevent them from using spells. And when you do want to start using a different character, there's no way to get them leveled up quickly. Unlike a game like Suikoden, where taking a lower level character into a higher level fight will shower them with enough XP to gain multiple levels, here there are really no shortcuts for that. However, when you do level up, it is more meaningful. You gain health, mana, maybe a new ability or spell to use in combat, and skill points that can be used for both combat skills and other things. We'll get to that part of the game soon. Star Ocean could really use a few quality of life items that are seen in other similar games. There's no quick dungeon escape item or spell. There's also no tent-like object that lets your whole party rest and recuperate in one go. Instead, you have to use spells and items to restore everyone's status, health, and mana individually. But that brings me to one of my favorite parts of the game, the sheer number of items that you can make using a variety of different crafting skills. There's cooking, art, music, metalwork, compounding herbs, authoring books to increase your skills, calling familiars to bring you items in dungeons, and scouting, which lets you increase or decrease the frequency of random encounters. There is so much to do. You'll get access to new skills by buying them in towns, and putting points into them will open up crafting and combat abilities and specialties. So, if you put points into Kitchen Knife, Good Eye, and Recipe, you'll open the cooking specialty for that character. But the talent points also often have dual benefits. So while the biology skill increases your compounding ability, it also gives you extra health. And Kitchen Knife contributes not just to cooking, but to your strength value as well. To put another layer on top of this, once a number of characters have become skilled in certain specialties, new super specialties that use the talents of the entire party will open up. These include things like blacksmithing to make your own armor, or publishing books, which you can then sell to a publisher and make mad cash from royalties. And yet another layer, but this time a hidden one on the bottom, is that each character has certain talents that dictates what specialties they'll be successful at. You can't successfully make art if you don't have a sense of design. But you can develop one if you practice hard enough. You can craft pretty much anywhere at any time other than in combat, though you'll likely be pretty bad at it at first. You need to use your skill points wisely to get to a point where item creation can be counted on. But when it does start working, boy, it is magic. I just love the animation and sound effects while you're crafting. You'll see something being shaped. It'll go from a weird lump to a recognizable object and then back again. And all the while, it's making this great bloop bloop noise that I just can't get enough of. If this were a mechanic and presentation used in a more transactional type game, anything with loot boxes or gambling, I would say that this is manipulative and addictive. But since this is a single-player JRPG, it's just fun. Will this cook result in daikon miso soup, which is Bowman's favorite food and can restore all of his health and mana? Or will it be smelly rice cakes, which no one wants to eat? I never get tired of watching the process and finding out. In the second half of the game, there's even an Iron Chef-style cooking competition that tasks you with making as many dishes with premium ingredients as you can. I love this so much. It not only puts my favorite crafting specialty on display, but also the host and judge, the food god and Prince of Darkness Yarma, is hilarious. And the food descriptions just sound so good. There is so much to discover within the skill system. Besides items and equipment which will help you in combat and other areas of the game, there are also really charming additions like portraits of each character that can be drawn, or the Oracle ability which gives you hints and trivia about the game. And while crafting can certainly be used to make the most powerful items, and the method of doing so is often complicated, you don't have to put that much time into it if it's not really your thing. You can certainly get through the game with the equipment and items you can buy from shops. I don't want to get very much into spoilers in this game, but I do want to loop back to the story and some things that happened in the second half of the game. If you want to skip this portion of the video, go on to the next segment. At the midway point, at the swap to the second disc, the game changes significantly. You leave Expel and find yourself on a much more technologically advanced planet, where you learn who your true enemies are and the real threat the world is facing. You get to explore new cities, experience new forms of transportation, and meet new characters. The Expel stuff is great, but getting to discover an entirely new world that works differently is amazing. I do think this second half is a little dungeon heavy. Maybe one or two could have been cut out, but many of the environments are really interesting as you explore futuristic towers and mountain summits. One particularly good series of dungeons are called the Fields of Intelligence, Love, Courage, and Power. And aside from offering some great fights and a little puzzling, at the end of each, the protagonist will experience a vision or memory related to the dungeon title. This is a really nice way of exploring a bit more of the characters' backstories and personalities, and is another great example of how the game balances between story and combat. Lastly, I have to talk a little more about the music. It was composed by the prolific Motoi Sakuraba, who composed music for most Tri-Ace games, along with many games in the Tales series and the Dark Souls trilogy. This is a fantastic soundtrack, which features complex orchestrations, beautiful piano and flute melodies, and drum-heavy progressive rock sounds. The opening track captures the feeling of space exploration with both drama and hopefulness. It almost sounds a little like Star Trek: The Next Generation. The theme to Arlia Village is one of my favorite town themes ever. It's ethereal, conjuring the image of a calm and cozy village overlaid with a big dose of enchantment. Other themes, like Invasion, give a militaristic feel, a bombastic mix of marching drums and crashing cymbals. And then there are the tracks that occur when things are going badly for our heroes, which perpetuate an ominous feeling of impending doom. It's a wonderful soundtrack, and I really wish someone would press it on vinyl. Star Ocean's second story holds up really well for me. It's not perfect, because no game is, and I do have a few complaints. But the good parts are really good, and it balances its various elements so well. I love that the story is full of twists and turns and grand threats to the world, but also a lot of smaller character moments for everyone in your party, which the private action system makes possible. And I love all the crafting and skill systems. They can be fiddly and there's a lot to learn, but the process of making something is just so satisfying. This more slow-paced minutia of building items and your character in the menus is balanced by an exciting real-time combat system. Had the game gone the typical turn-based route, the pacing overall might have been a little slow. I highly recommend this game, even though unfortunately it's not that easy to get a hold of it to play. Aside from the original PS1 version, the only English version of the game is on PSP. I really hope that this gets ported to the newer systems like the first game did. If you want to see more JRPGs, check out my review of Suikoden, or another of my videos. I have a Patreon if you want to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.